Kia ora koutou. Welcome everyone to our October GeoTalk here at GEOID, the Geo Education Outreach and International Development Special Interest Group of the Geoscience Society of New Zealand. Today it's my very great pleasure to welcome Dr. Sophia Tsang from the University of Auckland, who is co-leader of Soilsafe Kids, which is part of Soilsafe Aotearoa. And she'll be talking to us today about how they're combining research with education and outreach. Over to you, Sophia.
Thanks, Jenny. Let's see. So thank you so much for having me. As Jenny said, my name is Sophia Tsang, and I co-lead the Soilsafe Kids branch of Soilsafe Aotearoa. So, perfect. So I just want to start that this is very much a team effort. My co-leads, Victoria Egley and Emma Sharp, and Melanie Ka, who is our Soilsafe Aotearoa liaison. Emma and Melanie lead Soilsafe Aotearoa, come from a variety of backgrounds. So I am the earth scientist on board. Victoria works in the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences and is a nurse by training. And Emma is a geographer and Melanie is an environmental chemist. So as you can tell, we span a whole bunch of disciplines, and this would not be possible without our different disciplinary lenses and also our community partners. So we have a whole fleet of research assistants, as I like to think of them. And really, it's quite a large group pulling everything together. So I am here on behalf of everyone else, but I'm definitely not the only one working on this. So I would like to talk about what Soilsafe Kids is, a little bit about our sort of new flagship program that we've been running this year that has sort of expanded upon what we've previously been doing in the past, and then a little bit about what we've learned during the year and where we're going to from here now that our first set of data collection has just about completed. So for background, Soilsafe Aotearoa is our parent program. Soil underpins actually almost everything we do. And I know that I rarely think about it, but soil is, or I should say I used to infrequently think about it. Soil underpins our buildings and helps support them. Soil helps grow our food. And so we interact with it all the time, whether it be getting the last bit of soil off of our carrot before we start cooking it up to literally under our feet. But we're not necessarily thinking about it all the time, which means that it's actually degrading globally, and this is problematic for our quality of life moving forward. So in 2021, Soilsafe Aotearoa launched as a community science program, and there were sort of two main facets of that program. You could either get your home soil tested for heavy metals so that you have an idea about what your garden and yard is composed of, and therefore if you have, say, for example, a veggie garden or you're walking around barefoot, what types of things might get absorbed into your plants, and therefore you might need to be thinking about while you're cooking with your food from your garden, and also understanding our collective soil values so that as a country we have a better idea about what we value about soil, and therefore we can help guide decisions about environmental management moving forward. These were all focused on adults so that we had a better idea of what adults value. And we are still taking soil samples, so I'll circle back to that in a little while. But if you want to get your home soil tested, we are still very happy to do that. It's a service that's free of charge. But after a year of talking to lots of adults, looking at the Stats NZ, so the census data, we did realize that nearly a quarter of our population is under 15, which means that if we're talking to adults, we're actually not getting a full enough picture of both of what we as Kiwi value in soil. So that led to the launch of Soilsafe Kids this year in 2022. Of course, working with kids is a little bit different than working with adults. You need to assume less vocabulary and maybe reading levels and things like that. And so we know that kids interact with soil more often than adults do. They tend to go outside and play more, and often play means running through forests or yards, and also we'll do things like look for worms or specific bugs. They might help out in the garden. And frankly, when we're running around playing tag, I'm sure you remember that we used to fall over now and then. So we do interact with soil just by playing outside more often than adults tend to have the time for these days. And so with that, it's really important that we do hear kids' voices when we're considering collective soil values. So this year we've designed our flagship outreach program called the 3-day program, which combines workshops from all sorts of disciplinary and world lenses and worldviews to help teach kids about soil while also trying to learn more about what they value about soil. This is just one thread of our work. We also have a whole series of videos and teacher resources. We do shorter programs that are sort of, say, an hour or an hour and a half. And we have also worked with some high schools on some programs that they're working on with soil and heavy metals and things like that. Because at the beginning of this, Jenny and I were discussing translations and things like that, I just figured I'd throw out there that our website does translate into Te Reo Māori in addition to English, and our videos have New Zealand Sign Language captions, and we're working on getting Te Reo captions on there. So you can explore our resources in many different languages, and if it's not currently in if it's only currently in English, we are in the work in progress getting things updated. The website has been one of those things that's been harder to keep on top of than engaging with schools. It's just a little less exciting. So with that background, I briefly wanted to talk about conducting research in an outreach context because this is GEOED, so we focus a lot on our outreach. And that normally means engaging with communities and schools. And we don't necessarily take advantage of that time to also conduct our own research. But because we want to know about kids' soil values, it was an important part of this program. So we do have ethics approval from the University of Auckland for the work we do. And that means that we, in order to go engage with a class, there's sort of a lot more lead up time than a traditional outreach engagement because we need consent from principals to get access to teachers and asking teachers if they'd be interested in running the program in their classroom. The teachers have to consent themselves, who then turn around and send out consent and assent forms to the families and the students. So in order to participate in the research component of our workshops, we have to have a consent form from a family member and an assent form from a student, or the student is considered non-participating. This is really important because we have two groups of students that we're basically working with at the same time in all of our outreach engagements. We have consent students and non-consent students. So all of these students need to be able to participate and access the outreach and educational component of the program. And we need to make sure that we're being very careful about collecting data from students who have consent from their families and have given their assent, and not collecting data from the others. But at the same time, we don't want students who don't have consent, whether it be because they forgot their forms at home or they simply just don't want to participate, feeling left out. And so one of the big things that we've been managing has been how we have these two groups of students in the same room and we aren't differentiating between how they're interacting with us so that they don't have their consent status disclosed to anyone else in the room. So I'll get back to that in a couple slides to tell you a bit about how we're doing that. I'll also add that we had a third option for families and students who didn't want to participate in the outreach or the research component of Soilsafe Kids, but we actually haven't run into any student at this point who has actually expressed an interest in taking advantage of that. And we've worked with 8 different classrooms in this year. So the rate at which people want to fully opt out is quite low, fortunately. So in order to make sure that the students we're working with understand what we're talking about, we start with an introduction during our first workshop. And that first workshop is not only an introduction to who we are and what we'll be doing, but also basically a verbal version of our assent form for the kids. So we are working primarily with New Zealand curriculum level 2 students. So this means that they've entered school, they're familiar with school systems, they know what mat time is and what the expected behaviors are in that space. But they aren't necessarily strong readers. They've gotten to the point from going from being able to write a sentence to maybe writing a short paragraph, but they'll often need help with vocabulary and spelling, and they might be very slowly reading through things. And therefore, if you have a worksheet, there's the possibility even you might need to read it out loud to them so that they know what the questions are saying. So with that, our participant information sheets, like most ethics approved documents, are quite lengthy and difficult reading for these students. So we really start by making sure that they really know what they've signed themselves up for by giving a presentation about what we're doing and why and how we're doing it. So this is a snapshot of our slide about how we collect data throughout the 3 days. So really there are sort of 5 different ways we're collecting data. We have worksheets, one at the beginning of the program and one at the end. These are equivalent to surveys, and in the ethics approval process were submitted as surveys. But the worksheets are sort of a term and a process the students are familiar with. They're quite comfortable filling out worksheets at this point in school. We also have group discussions, which again, the students are familiar with and they know how to behave during, and there is a little bit of coaching about making sure we're taking turns. But these are, again, things that they're learning as being students, and so these are our focus groups. So they're semi-structured focus groups where we have submitted questions that we're going through, and we can draw out bits as we need. We also have what we're calling sticker questions. So we have a series of posters, and students are given stickers. They're binary questions to answer the question yes or no. So, or if it's something that's a little bit different, we can make sure that we can delineate it with 2 answers. So things like, do you garden at home? And you can answer with a sticker. So it's an anonymous way of providing data. We also have a lot of art projects built in. I'll show a couple examples of outputs in a couple slides. And so we take pictures and we get the kids to explain what they've actually drawn or painted or created in their art project. And then finally, the last workshop is a co-creation workshop, which I'll get back to in a couple minutes. But all of these form our data set. So it's very much a mixed methods social science research program. So we have 3 days here and 9 different workshops. So I'm just going to briefly run through these. Oop, gone too far. So 1 through 5 are on day 1, 6 through 8 are on day 2, and the showcase is on the 3rd day. So as I mentioned, we start with an introduction of who we are, what we're doing there, and what we're hoping to get out of our interactions. So the students have an idea about what's going to be going on over the next few days. Our second workshop is about Hineahuone, who is the first woman who Tane Mahuta created and breathed life into. So we have a story that we read, and then we have an art project attached to that. And so this is one way, because clay is a type of soil, we can talk about this importance of soil and clay in Te Ao Māori. We actually lead with this, and we make sure even when the other workshops get moved around a little bit, that this is always our first workshop, because we want to make sure that we're showcasing Mana Whenua voices in the program, and that it's not being pushed off later on, sort of like it's being forgotten. This is a key integral part of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and so we want to make sure that it's front and center. Our third workshop is one of those workshops that I definitely did not create. It's about the relationship between food and soil and the fiber cycle. So how fiber cycles through plants, through our digestive systems, and how it helps feed us and feel satiated after we eat, and how our food scraps and our gut microbe actually help break down fiber and return it back into soil. So this is something where I've learned a lot this past year. I haven't taken biology since high school actually myself, and so I've really enjoyed working with the medical scientists on this one. The fourth workshop is about compost, so it leads really nicely on from the food and soil relationship workshop, where the kids actually get their hands dirty and make compost, and they end up with a pet compost jar that they can add things into and that they can watch over time decompose in their classroom. So this is being led by the Garden Table Trust, which is one of our community partners. And so this is where we have extra people coming in as a community partner, so that we have different voices that we're showcasing throughout the week. So each workshop has basically been written by somebody different, whether they're part of the team or from an external group. And then we finish the day with a worm hunt and some soil sampling. So we still continue to collect heavy metals data from people around Aotearoa testing their soil, and so we want to encourage kids to go home and collect soil and bring it in for us. It is a free service that we are providing by testing heavy metals, but we realize that sometimes people don't go to the post office all the time or don't want to mail their samples down to Dunedin, where we have the lab and the part of the team that's actually processing the heavy metals testing. And so for the kids who are participating, we actually offer that if they want to go home and sample their soils and bring them into us, when we go in for the second day, we can take care of all the costs and the shipping and everything like that. And by going through Soilsafe Kids, we can make sure that the results they're getting are written in kid-friendly terms. We're aiming again for curriculum level 2, so basic vocabulary, so things like insoluble you're not going to find on there, and we can give kids a bit more of an idea about what their garden is like. Because we're sampling soil and we're demonstrating how to do that, it's a great time to go on a worm hunt. So one of our collaborators is Nicole Schoen from Ag Research, who leads the Great Kiwi Earthworm Survey. And so we're able to actually go through and break apart the soil and talk about soil health and the biodiversity we find in soil. And we've found that the kids really love learning about worms. Some of them don't necessarily like touching the worms, but they're fascinated by there's more than one type of worm in New Zealand, and a lot of our worms were actually introduced. So that sort of finishes our first day. So we've collected some sticker questions during the introduction and some focus groups and some worksheets. And then we have some art projects coming out of the second workshop. And we have some data for the Great Kiwi Earthworm Survey coming out of the fifth workshop. On the second day, we start by collecting everyone who's brought their soil samples in, and we actually talk about soil properties. So we can talk about how color varies from one soil to the next, and the texture varies. And we actually have the kids play with different soils so that they can feel this and they can see it, and they understand a little bit more about the different ways we can actually classify our soils. And this leads into a little bit about the chemistry of the soil and how we're testing the soil they've brought us for heavy metals. Our second workshop of the day is actually a different way of viewing soil. So we work with an artist who makes paints that are made from soil. So we actually give them some prepared soil samples that she's prepared for us from across Tāmaki Makaurau in Auckland here where we're based. And then the kids take their soil sample and turn it into paint and paint some pictures for us. So each of these are prompts that help us review the educational material we have from the first day to really help reinforce some of the ideas to make sure that students are learning over the course of the program. And then we sort of are on our way wrapping up at this point. We talk about science communication and the importance of science communication, how we do it, scientists, and why we communicate, particularly with the public. And we brainstorm different ways that we communicate as scientists with the public, with each other, and we talk about the importance of key messages. And so we get students to think about what are the key things that we've learned. And we also talk about the importance of vocabulary. So again, this is ways to help make sure that the kids are reviewing what they've learned, and we're reinforcing vocabulary so that if the teachers want to actually create vocab lists from the words that we've given, they can do that. And they can actually turn this into a larger unit in their class if they want. At the end of this, we take some of the different ways we communicate that we've discussed with the kids, and we actually allow the kids to create something of this sort. So we've had kids create plays as a creative way of sharing some science, which I know came up at SCANS last year. We've had kids create games. We've had kids actually use chalk and decorate the school so that when all the other students come out of their classrooms at the end of the day, they'll learn a little bit about soil as they look through the chalk diagrams and the chalk sentences on the sidewalk, which has actually been really fun watching the kids come out of other classrooms. We've made posters, we've written stories, we have blog posts on our website that some kids have submitted. So a whole range of different creation projects that we worked on as a group. And then we finished that with a worksheet that sort of circles back from the introduction. So we have a bit of a comparison about what kids have learned from the beginning and the end of the day. One of the things I've been surprised that we've heard quite a lot is if I were in charge of taking care of the soil in my neighborhood, I would make sure that the soil gets watered. And so that was one of the key lessons that comes out of the composting workshop that the kids have really seemed to pick up on. And then our final day really depends on the form of the communication products from the end of the second day, because we do have the option if kids want to have, for example, an assembly with their school and share with their school what they've learned. this is something that we're able to help facilitate. So there we go. There they are. One of the things we are collecting is soil from people's yards so that they know what's in their soil. So this is part of the instructions that we send home with kids in case they want to do this with their parents, where people can collect soil from home. We ask for up to 5 different samples, one from your front yard. This is generally the yard that's closest to the road. So we've have seen in international research that often that front yard will be a little bit more contaminated with lead than other places because it's close to a road. And so our leaded petrol actually means the fumes were getting lead in front yards. We ask for a sample from your drip line, so where your roof would have water falling to the ground. And this is really something where, if depending on the structure and the composition of your roof, we might find extra metals, something from your backyard, something from your veggie garden if you have one, and then one miscellaneous sample from anywhere else around the house that you might want to collect. And then we send you back results that look something like this, where you actually get an idea about how each one of these sections of your house is actually contaminated, or hopefully not. So before I move on, we have about 3,500 samples we've processed at this point. So that's about 700 homes we've tested across the country, and there is no end in sight. So please do feel free to hop on our website. I'll give you the link at the end, and test your soil if you're interested. So I figured I'd share some of the results that we've been getting and show you some of the collages and art projects and things like that we've gotten. So after we talk about Hine Ahone, we ask the students about what their favorite part is, and they actually get to create collages either from cardboard and colorful paper, or we've used felt for kids to actually illustrate their sentence or a couple sentences, short paragraph about their favorite part of the story. So this is one of our students telling us about their favorite part of the story. We've done so these pictures here are all drying. These are some of the paintings that the students have done with their soil sample paints, so their soil pigment paints. And here we've got a favorite place to interact with soil. And so someone has painted their garden outside. And here, someone else is also looking at their garden and how they're watering their plants, and they love their plants outside. And we also want to make sure that while we're talking about soil, that we can also relate this back to the students. It was really funny. I was in a high school about a month ago, and there were 2 or 3 students who came up to me because they were having an in-depth discussion, and they believed that all of the smart people who've existed all exist in the past, and there's no one smart left in the world because we don't hear as much about present day scientists. We tend to study past scientists in history class and science class in primary and secondary school. And so one of our focuses is that everybody is a scientist when they're observing the world and learning about it, and that we definitely have people who are local. Scientists are not just in Europe and North America. They don't all look one way. They don't all come from one culture. And so we have a focus on some scientists they may know. There's scientists here in Auckland. People have seen people like Juliette Gerard in the grocery store, and how we end up finishing this slide with, after watching them observe the world around them for a day, they're scientists too, and they can keep growing their observation powers and learning about the world around them. So this is one of the chalk diagrams we had under the school sidewalk, and the kids are exploring after class one day. Actually, this is before the bell rang. This was a different group who was going through and trying to answer the question. It was sort of a chutes and ladders kind of game on the sidewalk, and watching one of the other groups sort of work their way through this game, which extended sort of 3 classrooms long, was a lot of fun. So I briefly want to talk about some lessons we've learned and things to keep in mind while planning for for outreach in general. So we've found that in general, about 50% of the class returns consent forms and assent forms, and that generally we have somewhere between 50 and 0% not returning forms. One of the comments we've gotten back is that the documentation is a lot to read, which we fully understand. So this is the front half of a participant information sheet that's going to families. The back is almost as dense, and there is a lot of reading. When you have a lot to do in the evening and you have kids you're looking after, the last thing you want to do is sit down and read something as dense as this. So principals have commented that the required documentation that we have to put together for ethics committees is more than families want to read, and therefore it's more than they're necessarily going to have time to read. And so therefore we've probably gotten fewer consent forms back because of this. We do have recruitment flyers that are a single page and summarize portions of the participant information sheet that go out with the participant information sheets, but it's still quite a lot to sort of get through, and particularly read with kids, because we do have a kids version of this. And while we have pared it down quite a lot, we're only using the 500 most common words in the English language and things like that. It's still a lot of reading for curriculum level 2, which is anywhere from age 6 to sort of 11, depending on your reading level. We've also found that differentiating between consent and non-consent on the day takes a bit of work, because our original idea of taking name tags and just using different colors and writing different ways on the name tags so that we know who the students' names are, but differentiating consent that way, didn't work so well the first time. The kids ended up trading name tags, and when the kids traded name tags, it made it very difficult to figure out if the kid was consenting or non-consenting, and therefore how we were documenting the data. So for example, a consenting student in the sticker questions has one color sticker versus a non-consenting has a different color sticker, so they can both answer the questions and we know which data points to count and which ones to ignore. Or if we're taking pictures of art projects, we're taking a picture with the tablet, and for the consent, we're actually taking the picture, versus the non-consent, we look like we're taking the picture, but we don't actually take the picture, so that the kids feel like they're all participating the same, but we know that we're being really careful about which data we're collecting. So what we've learned is that the best way of differentiating between consent and non-consent is to actually take a colorful stamp and stamp their hands like you would do at the fair. And that way they can't really trade stamps, and it's a very obvious way to differentiate between consent and non-consent. We use one color for one group and a different color for a different group, and we can change that up really easily. I think the last good reminder is, because at the end of the day, the third day, we have interviews with the teachers about how they think it went and things like that, is that when we're planning outreach, a lot of the time we create slides and we go through them, and they're hands-on activities at times, but it's not necessarily continuously hands-on activities, because we want to make sure we get the content in. And while we're very much aware that kids can't stay seated and focused for as long as a lot of the students, those of us in universities, are working with, I think it's sometimes difficult to remember just how short their attention spans can be. One of the year 5-6 teachers that we worked with reminded us that 7-year-olds should never be seated for more than 7 minutes at a time. And so this has meant that we've been working on sort of stretches and dances and things like that that we can intersperse into presentations where we do want to give them more content, and try and breaking that up a little bit so that the kids are still moving every few minutes so that they stay focused, because you really do see their attention sort of peter off at the 10-minute mark, if not before. So it's things like, okay, we're all going to hop up and stretch like Tane Mahute, because we all know that Tane Mahute is a great big tall tree, and therefore we need to have a big stretch towards the sky. So it's things like that we've been trying to work on and break things up even more, so that we make sure that it's very much hands-on and we're not losing kids throughout the day. So we are in the process of working on our data so that it's in a presentable form, and I figured I'd just share some of what's going on our end for more of the public dissemination rather than the academic results. So we do have sort of very quick preliminary data that we send back to the schools so they have an idea about what we're learning from them. So this is an example of an infographic that we created using the sticker questions that we can circulate back to the teachers quite quickly after we've interacted with them, to just give them a sense about what their class is like. 82% of this class grows food in their garden, and their garden is at home. We also have kid-friendly soil results. So this is a draft. It's not actually finalized yet, and it's just example data. It's not anyone's particular, but they can look through and they go, oh, look, wow, my courtyard's really high in arsenic, chromium, and manganese. It's been a long day. And then the kids have a little bit more of an idea about what the metal is and what you can do if it's very high in a specific area and you want to try and do something about that. We also host art galleries. So this is something that has been going on prior to Soilsafe Kids. Soilsafe Aotearoa has been doing these where we can actually offer both workshops and different art, either featuring or using soil, so for the public to come in and take a look and think about how they interact with soil without even thinking about it. So these are some of the pigments that we use to create paints, and we have offered soil pigment paint workshops in the middle of these art galleries before, in addition to public talks. So we are working on art galleries. Hopefully there'll be one early 2023, but we do not have a date or a location yet, and are working on getting results back to everyone else so that they have an idea about how what they've given us is being used and will be used moving forward. We also have a whole bunch of resources on our website that are not related necessarily directly to our program itself, but they're posters online that people can download, and they can go learn about their soil outside by just carrying this poster along with them and identifying, for example, different worms, if they want to go out and find something to do during school holidays, for example. We have teacher resources. So we have a whole set of videos called Ask an Expert. They're a series of videos with environmental chemists, soil scientists, geotechnical engineers, etc., and there are corresponding worksheets. So these do have New Zealand Sign Language captioning already, and we're working on Māori captioning at the moment. But these are things that teachers can download, and then they will have worksheets that they can work through with the kids if they want to use this to expand what we've taught them into a larger lesson, or if they just want to work on soil without us in something of a larger unit. So they're tip sheets, which stand for term, interpretation, and picture. These are a relatively common teaching tool where you basically have your vocabulary word, you have a definition of some type, and then you have a picture to help you remember it. And so we've taken the terms that our experts have used in their videos to help turn these into vocab lists for the students. So finally, you can find out more about us on our website. We're also on social media. But you can also learn about soil testing if you want to go ahead and submit your samples from home on our website, which is soilsafe.auckland.ac.nz, and you can find Soilsafe Kids resources on our website also, in addition to a bit more about soil, upcoming events, and what we're up to. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to chatting a bit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sophia. It's the first project of this kind I've come across where the research and the outreach are so integrated. Usually you hear of projects that have wonderful outreach programs, but they're conducted separate to the data gathering and done kind of through a sense of obligation, I guess, to give back to the communities they're working with, which is great. But this is awesome as it's so integrated and is really producing a win-win for everyone. Congratulations to you and everyone involved.
Thank you.
We've got a small audience today, but I would love to open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions or comments they would like to ask Sophia today.
Hi.
Hey, Sasha. Kia ora.
Thank you. Kia ora. I really enjoyed your talk. It was really interesting. Thank you. I see that you've got a school down our way at Mahino that is part of the Soilsafe Kids. They've signed up as a school. Do you guys ever have people that come to visit down this way?
Fairly infrequently. The majority of the team is based up here in Auckland, but we do have collaborators and part of the team in both Christchurch and Dunedin who get out a bit. We're working on trying to expand into more regions. That's one of the goals for next year.
Right.
But it's been one of those challenges, frankly, especially as I've been finishing a graduate diploma in secondary teaching this year. Getting out of Auckland has been a little less frequent than I would have liked, especially with COVID lockdowns at the end of last year and things like that. So now that it looks like we'll be traveling a little bit more freely and my calendar is freeing up, we definitely are hoping to expand further afield.
Yeah, because you know, if you guys are in the Waitaki, I'd be really keen to connect with you guys because there's probably quite a bit of crossover with what we're doing. So it'll be really neat just to connect and just tease some of those things out.
That sounds wonderful. I don't think I put my email on the slides. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
But if you want to send me an email, it will probably be easier to connect down the track.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll write that down.
I always love to see the networking that goes on, even at, you know, relatively small events like this.
No.
Yeah, I guess I think my thoughts and comments are along a similar vein. Like this is really cool stuff, and you know, increasing the spatial scale would be kind of an awesome benefit. And I don't know if there are kind of ethics approval considerations for kind of sharing the data on some sort of like map layer or something like that. But like you know, I teach a 200 level course that integrates some biology and physical geography, and I think about some of this stuff, and it's like I think even these students would strongly benefit from this type of exercise and like some really hands-on learning, especially stretching after every 7 minutes. I like that idea as well. But yeah, so I'm just glad you popped the your email address in the chat, because I might, you know, I'm trying to get more hands-on learning into the courses. The students actually do go on to a field trip, so it'd be easy enough to collect some samples and send them up. Yeah.
Definitely. That sounds great. Yeah, we're definitely trying to expand. It's just been sort of a process of getting there, and making sure that what we're running is working well for the context before trying to take on more, because the travel adds a whole nother layer of difficulty at times.
So where does the funding come from for Soilsafe Aotearoa in general?
Thank you for that. So Soilsafe Aotearoa is funded from a variety of different places. Our Dunedin team is actually GNS down there, so the GNS team. And so we have some from government, some from councils, sort of a plethora of different places. Soilsafe Kids this year is coming from Unlocking Curious Minds and Te Puna Hamatatini, the core. So we've been really generously funded by both, and really appreciative of that, because it's a little bit more expensive than a lot of the other outreach programs that run. Because there is that research component, there is koha for both the schools and the students who participate. And so it's not cheap to necessarily create a koha package for both schools and 30 students at a time. So there is an extra expense layer added.
Compared to regular outreach, but I'm sure like if you're not just doing regular outreach, that's coming out of a research budget as well, right? So
exactly.
yeah, it's
the
kind
research...
of in a little basket all of its own. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people are quite commonly giving koha for participating in research. So that is one of the things that is relatively typical for a research program. It's interesting. I think one of the benefits of actually combining the research and the educational outreach like this is, one of the things we've talked about in the past is how it's harder to find money to do outreach events, but by having that research component in it, it's easier to actually write a research grant to do this kind of work, and making sure that we're actually getting into communities in a way that I think is not necessarily easy to justify with some of our grant money.
And it's cool because you can, in all honesty, turn around to the kids and go, you guys are being scientists, like actually, you know, you're not just going through the motions, you're not just learning skills, you're actually doing the work. So yeah, which is really cool. In terms of combining research and outreach, doing outreach, particularly with young kids, requires a certain set of communication skills, as you're discovering, particularly in terms of vocabulary and things, in terms of like the written resources you have to do, but also I think interpersonal and presentation skills. Is that something you guys got training in, or is it, you know, you grab people who are particularly sociable, or like, hey, come on board? Like, how was that a consideration when you're putting your team together?
It's interesting because we have students who are really keen on being involved, students from the University of Auckland, but who are not comfortable in front of students. And so we have had group trainings. I actually have one assignment left, and I'm done with my graduate diploma in secondary teaching. So I've had a little bit more of the teaching and standing in front of classes experience. And one of our RAs, our research assistants, is actually a primary trained teacher. So we've had a little bit more training, but running one of these programs, we have at least 3 of us in the room at any given time. So we do need a number of people who are there and willing to interact with kids. And so that has taken a little bit more coaching now and then, and sort of trainings throughout. So yeah, there is definitely some, hey, you seem like you might be good at this. Do you want to come join us? And there is a bit more sort of helping mentor people into something where they're growing into being in front of students. And it helps, frankly, with university tutors too. If you can teach at primary, you can probably teach at tertiary, because tertiary students are a little bit more understanding and generous about things being slightly off now and then, and sitting quietly and listening.
And they may also enjoy the stretching every 7 minutes as well.
You see their attention peter off over the hour when you hit lecture too.
Absolutely. Oh, even adults, anyone who's been in an all-day seminar knows adults have a very short attention span too. Have you had any surprising results? I don't know if you're in a position to be able to actually share any of your data, but in terms of the soil contamination data you've been getting?
So I am going to sort of not share too much, but the papers are currently in review, so they should be out soon. And they definitely do vary regionally also. So there are some surprises, but I suspect that Melanie would be better positioned to talk about them more than I am, given that her background is soil chemistry, and she has a better sense of what's expected. One of the things that has been a large talking point has really been that we don't really have standards for school soil and metals and things like that around New Zealand. So we have guidelines about what the metal limits should be if you have 10% of your land growing produce, or none of your land growing produce, or 50%. But schools sort of sit outside that, and community places in general sort of sit outside that, and how maybe we actually need to think about, rather than just growing food, other places we're interacting with soil all the time, what sort of guidelines and what sort of metals should we be expecting? And so part of it's building up an idea of what's actually present so that we can actually talk to that a little bit more.
Absolutely. It sounds like very important data to have, particularly, when kids spend so much of their time at school playing outside. Yeah. All the best with your ongoing work. I hope we've drummed up some more soil samples to be sent to you. And all the best with the rest of your outreach in schools.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much. Take care.